Welcome. Thank you all for joining us again for the second annual Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. My name is Kaylee Pratt. I'm a senior policy analyst at Partnership for Strong Communities. I am also joined today, in addition to the panel, as with Sean Gio, our policy director from Partnership for Strong Communities, who will be joining me as well. This year, PSC is hosting 3 days of conference sessions featuring local, state, and national experts leading conversations that explore challenges, share best practices, and coalesce us around critical next steps to address key affordable housing issues in our state. You can join the conversation at hashtag CAHC 2021 on Twitter and follow us at PSC Housing. This session is titled Partnership for Strong Communities Research Associates Program, Spotlight on the Researchers. And before we get our conversation going, I will quickly thank our sponsors. We would like to thank our leading sponsors, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and the Melville Charitable Trust. Their deep support has allowed this conference to happen. Thank you to our collaborating sponsors, the Connecticut Department of Housing, Webster Bank, and Rockport Mortgage. We have a number of supporting sponsors we would like to thank: Beacon Communities, Corporation for Supportive Housing, Elm City Communities, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, JHM Group, LISC, National Equity Fund, and Trinity Financial. And last but not least, our session sponsor for this session is CT Association of Realtors. All right. All right. So I have, I think I was able to close my screen there. And before we move on, I just want to provide a couple housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, and we will make all recordings available following the conference. And it is also being broadcast on CTN. All speakers have entered muted. Please remain on mute unless a speaker has invited you off of mute. If you have any technology issues, please select the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and send any questions to the PSC Zoom meetings chat option, and we will do our best to assist you. Your speakers will also let you know how they would like content questions to be submitted. So with that, I will turn it over to Sean to get us started, to provide a little bit of a context for what we'll be talking about today, and then we can hear from our wonderful research associates. Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'll be brief so we can get right to the folks that have the answers. But I'll just start by saying I'm the policy director at Partnership for Strong Communities. I've been with the partnership for about 5 years now. We've, over the last year or so, we've really tried to turn more attention to writing original content around housing policy. It's something the partnership's done for many years, and we're trying to do more of it. And as part of that, we conceived of this, trying to launch a program for young writers, young diverse writers, young diverse researchers. So we launched this program thanks to the generous support of the Grosstein Family Foundation and Harper Foundation for Public Giving about a year ago, first with Thalia's engagement, and we'll hear from her soon. And I just wanted to say a little bit about how I feel like this fits into the partnership's goals of ending homelessness and also expanding housing affordability throughout the state. And really what we're trying to do is get new perspectives. Anyone that works in the housing policy space will tell you that most of the voices are a little older than these research associates and often a lot whiter than the state as a whole. If you were just on the last session, you know that that segregation is a long-standing issue in Connecticut, and it also is true in policy advocacy circles. It is still too much dominated by white voices. This is really one opportunity to try to hear from younger voices. as well as more diverse voices. So I'll leave it there, Kaylee, and we'll hand it back to you.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, so to kick us off, I just wanted to put out to the panel if each of you could just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the projects you're working on within the program. So I'll ask Thalia if you can go first.
Hi, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Thalia Giraldo, and I have been working at Trinity College for the past 4 years. I'm starting actually a new role with FHI Studio, which is a local urban planning firm, just this week. But during my time at Trinity and as a graduate student, I worked with the partnership during grad school in particular, and have been looking at homeownership assistance programs with them throughout that time. So my work is mostly focused on looking at the ways in which homeownership assistance programs like down payment assistance or financing actually work to undermine wealth building for people of color. And my interest has really been too with racial segregation and understanding some of the more historical context of that, and then connecting it back to why we see homeownership assistance being such an issue for people of color to use. So that's been really the focus of my work. And I'm really interested in continuing writing with the partnership. I released a report with them earlier this year, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work with them.
Thank you. Alexis, do you want to go ahead and
Sure. Hello, thank you for joining and for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm a regional planner with the Northeastern Connecticut Council of Government, and I am a UConn graduate with a background in environmental and climate justice. And in my current role, I've been interested in looking at resiliency and planning through this lens. And I'm excited to share the research that I'm exploring through the Research Associates program. I was inspired by a movement I came across by American Forests to calculate tree equity scores for urban neighborhoods across the country. Looking at the maps and breakdowns reminded me that one of my first frames of reference for disparities between neighborhoods before I had the tools to understand inequality on a deeper level was trees. I have distinct memories of driving through and seeing the sudden change from suburban lawns and roads lined with foliage to pavements and parking lots. Although I couldn't really place it at the time, I was seeing the lasting impacts of historically segregated neighborhoods and redlining that has shaped American cities and resulted in stark differences on a block-to-block basis. While primarily valued for aesthetics, trees also provide shade and can serve as critical infrastructure in neighborhoods to keep temperatures down and reduce energy costs for cooling. Through my research, I want to explore redlining's lasting impact on Connecticut cities to evaluate to what extent discriminatory housing practices have increased vulnerability to climate impacts in predominantly Black and Brown neighborhoods. And since my project is very GIS and map heavy, I was hoping to be able to share a screen with you just to give a better visual of what I'm talking about. If you can bear with me for a moment, and I'll see if this goes through. I should be sharing my first slide with you now. Oh, let's go back a bit. Okay, perfect. The first image is an original map of the Homeowners Loan Corporation redlining grade for the city of Hartford. And this next image is those grade blocks mapped onto a current map through GIS. Redlining, as I mentioned before, is a discriminatory practice resulting in the systemic denial of services, such as the direct or indirect denial of loans, mortgages, to residents of certain neighborhoods or communities. And this next image is the HOLC grading system, which shows how the graded desirability of a city was based on primarily the presence of certain racial or ethnic groups within those neighborhoods. This is important because in these redline neighborhoods, marginalized people were not able to accumulate generational wealth through home ownership. which furthered the inequality between neighboring communities. And then this next image is of the tree equity score assigned to neighborhoods within Hartford. In this map, a score closer to 100 or a darker shade indicates more equitable distribution of trees. And in my next steps in the research process, I hope to join the two maps that I showed you to see to what extent having a quote unquote worse HLC grade has on whether in present day you have the necessary infrastructure of tree cover to based on the metric generated by American forests. And then this last image that I will leave you with, oops, sorry about that. This last image that I will leave you with is a side-by-side street comparison of two residential streets in Hartford that are about an 8-minute drive apart from one another, according to Google Maps. And on the left is Terry Road, which was in a grade A neighborhood, and on the right is Garden Street, which was in a grade D neighborhood. So I look forward to learning more, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. And Alexis knows that I absolutely love learning a bit about this and nerding out. So great, thank you. And Jamil, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about what you're working on.
Thank you very much, Kaylee. My name is Jamil Ragland. I am a staff writer at Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, and I'm also a freelance writer. Most of my work lately appears in Connecticut News Junkie, but I've also written for the Hartford Courant, the Connecticut Mirror, and several other news organizations throughout the state. And my project is primarily a memoir that's that's mixed in with research about the things that I experienced in my own journey through housing. I start when I was very young, living in Hartford and Martin Luther King projects right next to Dutch Point before that area was rebuilt, and what that area was like in terms of housing and the schools around it, and trace that through to my adulthood as well, and how I went through all these different forms of housing, living in complexes, living in projects, living in homes, and how all those things are intermixed with the actual experience that the other researchers are sharing, how all that data that you see actually impacts people in their everyday life. So my project is basically trying to illustrate how terms like redlining and blockbusting actually play out in the everyday life of a person, me in this case, but how all these things actually do have impacts on individuals and impacts how they actually can make choices. I was inspired to do this because I've had conversations with friends about residential segregation. And one of my friends, a well-meaning guy, said to me, well, don't Black people just want to live with Black people? Isn't that why we have segregation? And I had to explain to him, well, you know, what looks like a personal choice is actually a result of decades of decisions that have been made that impact what personal choice you actually can make. So that conversation really led me to want to say, this is how these decisions have led to the choices that I have made. And if I can illustrate that through my own life and through my own experience, then I can maybe put some actual feeling and emotion behind these terms that get thrown about, but sometimes don't really connect with people as they're trying to understand them.
Thank you so much, Jamil. And I think that this is a great point that you're all making, is that this Research Associates program kind of allows for a wide range of different types of writing. And so I think that that's really nicely displayed in the three of your projects that you're working on. Sean, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'm so excited to work with the three of you. Some of us, we've known each other for a little while, but it's really great to dig into these topics. And Thalia, I was hoping you could talk, maybe expand a little bit on your first paper around equitable home buying, and particularly around the framework that you came up with. And then I can maybe add a little bit about how I believe that's already influencing policy in the state, and we can talk about that.
Sure, definitely. So yeah, I definitely want to touch upon the racial segregation piece. So we know that homeownership has traditionally been the way that folks in this country gain wealth. And I think that through decades of historical discrimination, whether it is redlining or blockbusting or name whatever you want to name it, and especially I think nowadays more of the unconscious bias that folks can't really name. All of those things widen the gap and widen the racial gap that make it extremely hard for people of color to be able to compete for the low amount of housing that's available for us. So part of the work that I was doing was trying to name that racial segregation, name and make it a fact that these things did happen in the United States, but also that some of the homeownership assistance programs that do exist don't make any of the work any easier. So the homeownership assistance programs that I was looking at, which were things like down payment assistance, grants that maybe employers or colleges or hospitals offer for their employers, always seem to have a transactional piece to them. There's always something in exchange for what you're getting. So if you get a certain grant, you have to stay with the job for an X number of years, or you have to live in the house as an owner, occupy the house for a certain number of years. If there's a down payment assistance program, you might have to pay some type of interest if you're financing it. There's all these programs that are intended to help the person that is looking to buy a home, but I think in exchange it really puts people back. And I think what it really showed me, what really surprised me, was that poorer folks are often paying more over time. So where someone would get some type of benefit on the forefront, let's say that they're getting the down payment, they're getting a grant, and they're also financing their down payment. Over time, they're going to be paying more than someone who didn't have to use those programs, because they're paying interest and they're paying with their time and energy. So that for me was the most surprising, that even though all these programs are set to exist, they're really putting people behind with their time and energy just because they have to use the program. So I think in the end, it was really important to be able to show that lower income people and people of color are already jumping through so many hoops. And these homeownership assistance programs just add additional hoops to that homeownership process, the home buying process.
Thanks, Thalia. And I have some ongoing research I'm conducting thanks to a grant from the Harvard Foundation for Public Giving as well, and really looking at expanding what can be done. What's the universe for expanding what we might call unrestricted home ownership in Hartford for home buyers of color. And really, I've taken your framework and applied that to trying to form policies that the foundation and other private philanthropy in the city and perhaps the state might look to create programs that have fewer, if not maybe perhaps none of these strings attached. As we heard in the last session with Connecticut Fair Housing, and they talked through the history of segregation in Connecticut, programs like the GI Bill, which were not available to people of color, did not have strings attached. And my grandfather is one of the GIs that benefited from that, and went from coming from a very low income lifestyle to being able to own a home in Bristol for the rest of his life. So I'm very grateful to that. To your research, I really do think in the end that it's going to continue to have a lot of influence in policy. Kaylee, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I just wanted to note to the audience, if you have any questions that you want us to ask the panel, please put them in the chat. We do hope to engage you as much as possible in this discussion. So I next want to, I know that each of you are researching, writing on different kind of areas of the housing kind of world, but I want to ask if there were any challenges, or at least the biggest challenge that you faced or expect to face in this research, and can you just describe a little bit about what challenges you are facing?
Sure, I can start, I guess. I think my project is very GIS heavy, and so I'm working with ArcGIS Online and using something called story maps, which creates this visual that you can look through and use the interactive maps. And I think the biggest challenge that I've been facing personally has just been learning how to use this new platform. And it's been challenging, but definitely rewarding. And I think that I'm very excited for how the piece will turn out using that platform.
Thank you.
I can jump in.
Great.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. One of the hardest things for me is kind of like weaving together the personal and the research, because a lot of times I felt like this story was coming across as kind of like a typical story of an African American living in the city, right? And that was not what I wanted to really portray. But as I really went through my own experiences and started comparing that to the research, this kind of is not just another one of those sob stories so much, but actually the ways in which these types of things actually do impact what someone like me can do and where I can go. And one of the best examples of that was kind of like my own journey through from Hartford out of the city into the suburbs, went into Bloomfield. And that is a direct result of blockbusting practices that led African American and West Indian families out of Hartford into the Blue Hills Avenue area, specifically in that type of way. And so as I started learning more about that, and I realized that, oh, okay, it wasn't just simply that we wanted to move to Blue Hills Avenue. This is the place that is available for people of color as they're moving out of Hartford. And so it's not just simply talking about that you have had an experience that is anecdotal and you can dismiss that, but being able to back it up with research to say these anecdotal experiences point to larger trends, and just trying to make sure that that comes across as accurately as possible. But I think it's been going pretty well, and I'm, having you and Sean to take a look at it and help me in that way has been really helpful as well.
Yeah, and then I would add one of the biggest challenges, especially coming from grad school, is just transitioning from academic writing to like policy writing. And I think that for younger folks, that's, probably one of the biggest challenges, that we're just used to writing in a certain way. And I think that, this is part of why I'm so grateful for the program in general, right? Because we have access to policy writers, we have access to people that are on the ground and doing this work, and helping younger folks transition into that style of writing. So for me, it was more about the technical skill.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I think to your point, Jamil, the kind of joining of narrative and research is not only powerful, but it's challenging. So we absolutely appreciate your willingness to share your story, and really looking forward to when we can publish that for everyone to read it. Sean, I want to hand it back to you.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I was busily responding to some questions in the chat. I guess the next question I'd start maybe with Thalia. I think we started with Alexis last time, right? Well, maybe we'll stay with Alexis, because I think there's been some questions about tree planting and programs, but more importantly, do you have a sense, or can you speak to how you think your research and writing, or this research and writing in general, might advance racial equity in housing across Connecticut? How do you think your work might be able to impact that?
Sure. I think I just want to draw attention to the fact that housing is obviously very important, and I think that things like infrastructure, like tree cover, is something that we need to consider, especially when it comes to climate change, and which communities will be most at risk to the negative impacts of climate change as that progresses. So I think environmental injustice and environmental justice is something that housing goes hand in hand with a lot, and we don't really see that at the forefront of the conversation as much. So I think I just want to draw attention to that and demonstrate the importance and why these inequities stem from discriminatory housing practices. Yeah.
Jamil, do you have anything you could add?
One thing that I also focus on in my essays, my older experiences as someone looking for housing as well. And I think that one thing I really spend a lot of time talking about is just the way that landlords interact with people of color and interact with low-income residents, and how that has a real impact on the types of services you receive and the type of health outcomes that you receive. And so the thing about the research as well is that all of this is based on, at the end of the day, decisions that individuals make. Individual people have made decisions that lead to redline, that lead to blockbusters, that lead to unsafe, unclean housing. And those interactions between individuals are what ultimately create policy. So trying to shine a spotlight on the way that I was disrespected, and the way that I was spoken to as someone living in subsidized housing, as a person of color, until they realize, oh, you go to Trinity, oh, you do writing and stuff like that. And then their attitude changes. And it's like, but that's not where my worth is based. My worth is based as an individual. My worth is based as a person who deserves safe, clean housing, just like every other person in this complex deserves that as well. And has nothing to do with my level of education or my ability to write. And so I want to draw attention to that as well. It makes a difference how people talk to you and how they treat you in the outcome that you have, and whether or not you actually have safe, affordable housing or not. And I really think that that can have an impact, because people need to understand that it is actual individual decisions that compromise the health and safety of other people.
Thanks, Jamil. Thalia, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I feel like I would really love to see, you know, I spoke a lot about what the program shouldn't look like in my piece, right? That there's a lot of transactional pieces to the homeownership assistance program. So I would love to see a homeownership assistance program or some type of, I guess, framework to help the programs look a little bit differently, right? Whether it looks something more like a grant, it looks something more like a program similar to what the Hartford Land Bank is doing, where they're training people of color to rehab homes. I think those knowledge building programs are really important, and being able to minimize the amount of transactions to these programs is really important, because it gives this sense that people of color aren't trusted with the money that they're given, that they have to do something in exchange. So whether it's staying in the home for a certain number of years, or this interest that over time builds so that they're paying more over time, those things are really detrimental in the long run. So I would love to see something that looks a little bit differently, and trust people to be able to build wealth on their own, and to also help them gain the knowledge that they've been, you know, frankly robbed of over decades of time.
Thanks, Kaylee. Back to you.
Thank you. And I think, Thalia, one of the questions that came up in the chat, I believe you just answered, but I wanted to share it just in case you had anything else to add, was if you can expand on the programs, what they should look like, and how they should be defined for lower income families.
Sure, yeah, and I saw the chat, so I wanted to get to it in the conversation. But I mean, I think Sean's point about the GI Bill is really important, because we can put some of those two things together. They're different, but they're really similar, right? When vets came back from the war, the GI Bill gave them the opportunity to have loans, grants that they didn't have to pay back, loans that were basically interest-free, and jobs as soon as they came back from the war. So I think that in that sense, we need to be able to support people of color that have been through decades of racial warfare, and we need to be able to give them the same support or similar support. So I would love to be able to see programs that do look like that look like grants for first-time home buyers, that look like I mentioned earlier, the Hartford Land Bank is supporting people of color to rehab properties. I think that's really impactful, and being able to see something more like that, and things that are also targeted for people of color is important, because as we know, we've been denied those accesses and those services and that knowledge and the time to build wealth over time. So programs like that, I think are really important and definitely catch my attention, especially as I'm doing this research.
Thank you, Talia. Jamil, I wanted to ask you, I know you've been a freelance writer, and as you mentioned, for several publications across the state, and for some time. And given some of the clear racial inequities that have come to the forefront, that have been there, but have really been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as some of the instances of brutality over the last several years. I wanted to see if you've kind of seen any change or have noticed the kind of like ground roar discussion of this rising, and kind of how what your perspective is on that and how you're kind of adding your voice to that.
Thank you for that question. There's been people that are doing really good work around housing and ownership and property ownership in Hartford for a while. The Hartford Community Loan Fund is one of those places. Full disclosure, I'm good friends with the director, Rex Fowler, but we met basically through, my writing and his commitment to trying to do more around race and equity in terms of home ownership, access to capital and financing and things of that nature. So that's how we met. And I've seen some of the work that they've really done. And that was even before the pandemic and the racial justice protests of the summer ago. I think that where I see it heading is that it feels like there's kind of been a slowdown in a lot of ways. That there was a lot of energy right after George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder and some of the other really high profile instances of police brutality that kind of shined the spotlight on that one area in particular. But there's kind of been like a slowdown in terms of putting all the pieces together in terms of how these things fit together. And I think that housing is really interesting right now, but in particular because we see that the housing market is so hot right now. And it's partially because people are trying to move out of the cities as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and people feeling less safe in these crowded areas as a result of it. And I don't think there's been much of a conversation at all about how does race play into that movement. Are people of color having the same opportunities to move out of the cities where they feel less safe? Or are they just kind of going to be left in like another type of white flight that's happening right now, right? Whereas before it was kind of financed through like the GI Bill I was mentioning and other types of things. Now there's kind of like this health white flight that's happening. People are trying to get out of the cities to stay safe from the pandemic. And still the same people are being left behind as a result of that. And I don't see much of a conversation about that at all, honestly. And I think that that's a place that really needs to be talked about because like Alexis mentioned, there are already health inequities in tree coverage. Those hotter city landscapes exacerbate asthma, they exacerbate diabetes, they exacerbate all sorts of pre-existing health conditions that are already exacerbated by mold and old buildings, by rat feces that's not being cleaned up, that aren't being swept by maintenance. All these things play together. Denser housing, something like the coronavirus, even more so. That's the conversation that needs to be had. How do all these health inequities play together? And if white people and others who can are just moving out, is anyone doing anything to address those issues that are left behind?
Thank you, Jamil. Jamil, we were having a little bit of difficulty hearing you through that, but then you came back at the end. Just wanted to note that. But you seem to be good at the end. Sean, back to you.
I have a sort of a two-part question. One is, perhaps advice you might have for your peers and other young writers or the young thinkers about advancing policy and advocacy. But I think first I'd like to know your thoughts about how, like for institutions in Connecticut, how do you have thoughts on how institutions like, whether they be political, local, or perhaps media, what are some things that you think they should be doing in order to expand the voices that we're hearing from in this state? For example, I know Connecticut Mirror recently created the community editorial board, and in an effort to try to really broaden who we're hearing from through the Connecticut Mirror. So I'll start with Alexis. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, either the sort of institutional expansion, or what your peers, advice to your peers.
Sure. I guess just making space to hear from diverse voices from different backgrounds. I think people that are in my generation have a lot to bring to the table, and they come from a lot of different schools of thought. And I guess to my peers, I would say, take the chance and apply to any and everything and make yourself heard. And people want to hear from you more than you think. And you have the chance to actually really make a difference with your words. So I think that's my advice.
Alexis, sorry, Jamil, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Alexis's advice is often reminds me of my advice with local planning. And Alexis, as a planner, you might relate. Is your voice is really powerful at the local level, and really expressing yourself at the local level. We really need that. We really need folks to engage with their local elected officials. So even if it's not in a writing research way, it is expressing your priorities around policy. It's vital that your elected officials hear from folks, not just because we know there's lots of research that shows that typical folks that are talking or at public hearings are typically a lot whiter, a lot older, and more likely to be homeowners than the residents at large in their community. So, Jamil, go ahead.
To add to Alexis's point, I think that young voices need to really be encouraged as well. It's one thing to believe in your own voice, but it's another thing to have someone else. In terms of my own experience in writing, I came to the partnership through my writing. I met David Fink because he read a couple of my articles, and that was what established a relationship that I have with the partnership now. But that relationship was nurtured through people who encouraged me to write throughout my life, who told me that I was good at it, and who encouraged me to actually share my voice. So it can be sometimes difficult for people to believe in their own power of their own voice unless there's someone actively encouraging them to actually believe in that. So I think it's really important as well that in addition to setting up things like the community editorial board, actually going out and looking for people and saying, I want you to write. We want you to write. We want to hear what you have to say. And as opposed to, building it and they will come, you have to bring them into it. And particularly because writing is such a difficult thing to do. And it's something that's so highly scrutinized. Not a lot of people feel very confident in their ability to communicate through writing, and having people who encourage them to do that could be something that actually leads to more voices as well.
Thanks, Jamil. That was really insightful. I appreciate that. Thalia, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, yeah. Jamil said it so much better than I was going to say, but that's, you were spot on. So I was just going to say, the Partnerships Research Associates program is a pipeline for this. And I think that is exactly how to get young writers to actually do the work. If they're applying to these, to the editorial board, if they're submitting their work, they're already confident enough in their own work to do it. And I think oftentimes young writers, and definitely young writers of color, they may not feel confident because they haven't had that mentorship or folks telling them that they can do this work and that their voice is important, and that their experiences give them the ability to make this writing really, really powerful. So I think that it's up to the institutions to go out and find folks and recruit them and have them, but also mentor them throughout the process, because I don't think it's, you create it and they will come. I think that these institutions really need to do the work to recruit and nurture these relationships. So I 100% agree with Jamil.
Thalia, just a follow on to that, this is new for the partnership, and I think we're learning what's really needed to create a program, right? Not just to have this be something more than just kind of contract freelance writing, right? To try to do some of what you just mentioned, to try to create some of those foundations, some of those that path. So, and we're learning. So, and I know you've done some thinking on that, and thank you very much for that. But I was wondering if there's any of that you might want to share right now about what are some of those sort of foundations that we need so that this really does become a program and others might create something like this.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said earlier, I mean, this program can work like a pipeline, right? You can take folks who are really interested in this work, that have some type of passion, and help them gain the tools to be able to do it in a really powerful way, in a really impactful way. And I think that it's more than just asking someone to write for, whatever in exchange, but it's also helping them see that they have the tools to be able to make their voices really powerful. So I think it includes some type of technical help. What is it like to actually write for an audience that has a really limited amount of time? They're not going to read your 15-page, academic paper. They don't have time to read your thesis. But how do you make something really short and really powerful? And I think that having access to people that are in the field, like with the partnership, is important. And again, everyone is in a different place. Alexis and Jamil and me were all in different places in the writing journey. And I think that whatever institution or place wants to do something that's similar needs to be sensitive to that, and be sensitive to the fact that we all have different needs. But also that group work is powerful. So reading each other's work and learning from that and giving feedback is really, really, really powerful, and a big confidence booster too. So I think it's more than, it takes work. It takes administrative work, as we've learned. So it would be something that needs to definitely have an investment.
Thanks. Alexis and Jamil, if either of you have anything to add to that,
yeah,
happy to hear it.
Sure. Just to add on really quickly, I think, like Thalia said, we're all in different places in our process, and Talia's already published her research. And I think that one thing that I really like about the Research Associates program is that we do all come together, and we do have that support from someone that's already gone through and is there to help us along the way. And I think that's also really important, is collaborative work and having other faces and other voices there to support you.
And Jamil, go ahead.
One thing I would add is that one of the best parts about the Research Associates program, and that I hope more people do, is that you pay the writers. And it's actually very important, because that's one of the ways in which people receive positive feedback for their writing. It's hard to be a writer because you don't know who read your work, because oftentimes people will engage with your work but not necessarily let you know that they read it. And so something as simple as receiving a stipend or some type of payment can be a positive reinforcement to say, you do get something out of this, and without knowing that someone actually read your work. But that's important. I hope that other programs that go forward consider how important it actually is to pay the writers when they're bring them in to do the work.
Absolutely. Kaylee? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jamil. Thank you. I wanted to ask the researchers how you learned about the program, and kind of a second part of that is, do you have any other suggestions on how we might be able to reach other people who would be interested in joining this program, maybe separate from how we reached you, and for us reaching out in this program, and maybe some of our audience members are interested in engaging young writers as well. So I will just give it to whoever comes off of mute first.
I guess
Thalia.
yeah. So I did my master's of public policy at Trinity. And when I was a graduate student, my professor, Sean Fitzpatrick, has a good relationship with Kylie Gosselin. So we actually consulted for the partnership, and I created a relationship with them even after my graduate program was over. And then they still remembered me. So a little over a year after my graduate program, Kylie reached out to me to see if I was interested in writing and being the first writer for this partnership for the Research Associates program. And it was quite a journey, going from academic writing to real policy writing and learning that writing is really, really hard and takes a really long time. But it was a great experience. And I got, amazing coaching from the staff. I was able to see what I thought was going to be a 500-word piece turn into like a 9-page report. So that was definitely a learning experience, but it's been great so far.
If I didn't mention before, I did put a link to Thalia's work in the chat earlier, so please check it out. I also added a link to Alexis's most recent blog. I don't know, Jamil and Alexis, maybe Jamil first and then Alexis, if you could let us know how you found out and if you have any suggestions on reaching more people.
Yes, so many moons ago, I worked for the partnership, and that's how I came to know you and Sean and Charlie, who formerly worked there, Charlie Shaddix, who was the director of communications before he left. And so last summer, I was just on LinkedIn, and Charlie sent me a message and asked me how I was doing, asked me if I'd be interested in participating in the program, and that's what brought me into it. So I think that that prior relationship, like Thalia described, is something that leads to our involvement in it. I think that's something that can be done in order to reach out to other people, just kind of like a constant commitment to sharing the program. A lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too, when you're working in a nonprofit organization, you'll put something out once and then kind of leave it out in the ether and hope that it kind of gets found, but kind of like really pushing it over and over again on social media channels, by word of mouth, by having, like deputizing us to be people who share about the program as well, and even checking in with us like, hey, who have you told about that? Really pushing it to make sure that the word is out there in kind of a consistent and constant way, so that people who haven't seen the tweet this week will see the tweet next week. Or I'll say, oh yeah, I know this writer who might be interested in this. I really do think that the word of mouth aspect is one of the most powerful ways to share programming and share opportunities. I think that's really a great way to do it.
Jamil, can you hear me? Kind of getting, oh, now it's like a speed. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
I think I left off on the word of mouth piece, and then we kind of lost you there. I think he's still having some trouble. Sean, can you hear him?
No, I can't either.
I don't want to speak for Jamil, but I do know that he is also, as part of kind of his extracurricular time, he's also has coalesced other writers into kind of a writing club, which is something that, the value of word of mouth kind of, moves past even just professional discussions into something like that. Jamil, I'm sorry, we don't have good connection with you, so I'm going to ask Alexis if she has anything to add.
Sure. Originally, I first heard of Partnership for Strong Communities in my role as a Sustainable CT Fellow, and we got the opportunity to tour the building, and I thought that was really awesome. And through that position, I was able to get my current position at the Northeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, where I was sitting at my desk and watching a webinar, and I heard about Thalia's research. And then flash forward over the summer, I was on LinkedIn and I saw the posting, and I think it was just very cool to learn that, like, where that came from, where that research was. And I guess in terms of spreading word of mouth, like as Jamil was saying, I think that's very important. And I think that's the way that I learn about most opportunities that I have the courage to apply for, is through that. So for other people, whenever I see something come up, at least with my recent college grads, I find that a lot of people will try to show support for other people and post on their own social media, showing that here's this opportunity that's available for people in my field, or for people that are from marginalized communities. And I think that's a really great showing of support for others, is that once you're in a place where you can have your voice heard, you're pushing forward to try to get that opportunity to others as well. And I've seen that a lot come up. And so I think that posting and like sharing with other people any means you have necessary is a great thing, and it helps reach a lot of people as well.
I would also add, to go where people are at. So, I mean, I think a college campus is a great example of that, going to, especially the social sciences, where you'll find folks that are really passionate about racial justice work and social justice work. It's a great way to find people. It's essentially, how I came to it, because with my graduate program with Sean, but that is a really great way of having a pool of people to choose from.
Thank you. That was really informative. I appreciate you each answering that question. It certainly underscores the importance of the relationship building and word of mouth. But I also think that this idea of kind of continuing to put things out there is something that, as Jamil noted, is something that we, that things get busy and you forget to do that. And it's something that we need to kind of keep out there. And I also think that having each of you as kind of, our inaugural group, and continuing to kind of educate potential new researchers is just very valuable. And so thank you for that. Sean, I don't know, I'll pass it over to you. I know we're coming very quickly to the end, so if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat. Go ahead, Sean.
One thing, just in response to some questions around Alexis's work about tree planting programs, I put it in the chat, but I believe in Hartford, Knox Park is still involved with the city of tree planting. And I think I saw Kevin Taylor from Neighborhood Housing Services of Waterbury on here, and Waterbury recently launched a tree planting program. And if you pull up the database that Alexis is working with, mapping for tree cover, you'll see, like Hartford, Waterbury's central located neighborhoods have very poor tree cover, so suffer many of the same effects. I'm sure that's true across the cities in Connecticut. So I owe Kevin Taylor, Neighborhood Housing Services, a check. I want to support those tree plantings, and I'm sure he'd be interested in anyone else doing that as well. And we'll look for resources in other communities to do that. And Alexis, we can include that when you publish your research.
Yeah, definitely. And I just added in the link to the treeequityscore.org, which is the map that shows that breakdown.
Thank you. So I don't know, are there any other questions in the chat? I don't think so. Kaylee, maybe we can wrap this up, give people a few minutes before the next session.
Yes. Oh, looks like Kevin Taylor said thanks.
Oh, good.
So
yeah.
before I kind of do our kind of outro info, I just wanted to give the opportunity to each of our research associates to, if you have any, final thoughts or final advice you'd want to impart, please go ahead and share. And if you don't, you can also just let us know when to look out for your next pieces. So I will go Jamil, Thalia, and then Alexis. So Jamil, please.
Sorry, can everyone hear me now? Okay. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to be on the panel. And I wanted to say, really read Thalia's work, read Alexis's work. It's really, really great work. It's really important. They bring a really awesome and important perspective to housing. They really did a lot of really hard work to do this. So please go check out their work. You can expect my piece in hopefully the next couple of weeks. I'm just finishing it up and trying to split it into parts that, like Thalia said, no one wants to read a 15-page essay. So just trying to find the right way to break it down and make it a little more digestible. But hopefully in the next couple of weeks, my piece will be out. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope that you read and enjoy everyone's work.
Thanks, Jamil.
Thanks, Jamil. I would say, and I just want to highlight, earlier I mentioned that I am in transitioning to be a planner at FHI Studio, and I do not think that would be possible without the help from the partnership. Really, really so thankful for you giving me the opportunity to write and to show my work. And I think because of that, I'm able to fully transition in the next few weeks to urban planning work. So thank you so much. And I think this is a prime example of really how impactful that this program could be for younger writers, helping them get into, break into these roles and creating a new generation of planners and policy writers. So thank you.
Thanks, Thalia. We're so excited to see where your work takes you. So please, we're obviously still working together, but we are excited to stay in touch. So Alexis, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to give a big thanks to Partnership for Strong Communities and the Research Associates program for giving the three of us, or four of us rather, the chance to have a voice and to be able to share this and bring our interests and have them heard. And I want to also thank Kaylee and Sean for helping us along the way. And I guess my leaving remarks would be, if you know anybody that would benefit from something like this, share and keep sharing, and hopefully we'll get more people this opportunity as well.
Thank you
I
so
also
much.
want to give a shout out to Charlie Shaddix, who I know is on the call. And he was so helpful during the editing process. So thank you. He was part of the partnership. So I really appreciate all his work.
I'll second that.
We have to give Charlie a lot of credit for really getting this program off the ground with Sean. So appreciate all of that work. And I think that concludes our discussion here. I do want to note we do have our next discussion is coming up in about a half an hour. The tenant's right to legal counsel and eviction starts at 2 today. Hopefully you can all join us for that. Thank you again to all of our research associates and everyone on the call that joined us today. I know that Kylie Goslin dropped the link to the Research Associates program in the chat. As was shared, please just continue sharing this out with folks who might be interested in joining it. So hope to see you all soon, and thank you again.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.